Chapter 5, Rape and Child Molestation. There are many different patterns of rape, the number one being race. Blacks are more likely to be both the rapist and the victim, and in most of the cases, 95% of those rapes are usually the victim and the rapist are the same race, and then in the other 5%, there's a black rapist and a white victim. Two major factors. There is severe legal penalty for the black men raping white women, and the racial segregation, meaning black women are more accessible to black men, meaning they are prone to rape from aggression. The age factor. Women are always more prone to rape than men. The most vulnerable age ranges from 16 to 20 years of age. The offenders are usually older than the victims, and black offenders are usually younger than the white victims. So I guess you could say, rapes are seasonal or situational. The number of rapes usually increases during the summer, having to do with the partying and the drinking and all that, going out to social interaction between everybody. So specifically gang rapes, they increase during the summer. And for the number of rapes, they tend to be higher during the weekend. So when everybody's out partying and stuff like that, it usually goes up. The planning and execution. Rapists often look for an easy target or a vulnerable target to make the process easier. For example, an older a woman under the influence is passive or submissive one, lacking assertiveness or confidence, or just a mentally ill female just waiting. Just look for something easy for them to attack. They usually use verbal coercion, and they use non-physical aggression. Rapists tend to become violent once they're ready to execute the act. So when they're trying to lure you in, they're like nice and everything. Well, they're just nice, and they don't seem like they're gonna rape you. And then when they're ready to, that's when they start being rough, and they either push, shove, slap, or choke you. The gang rapes are the number one rapes committed. So 43 of the world's population's rapes are 43% of that are gang rapes. The perpetrators' age range from 14 to 19. Most of them come from low-income families or members of street gangs. So they use many strategies to obtain a target. Number one, they either select the vulnerable target and select the deserted area and go ahead and commit the act, or they use a weapon to abduct the victim from the street, usually then at night where there's no people or it's dark. Gang members usually express interest in the target, so they set up on a date and they take her out and everything. And when they least expect it, they go ahead and kidnap and take them where the other members are waiting. They select the target, or they either select the target, they rape her right then and there in front of the public with pacifiers or bystanders just watching. They just do it. Acquaintance rape is usually executed with verbal coercion, so they talk to the victim, they just talk them through it, or they use psychological coercion, so they make the victim seem less of himself, and they just treat him as an object rather than a person, like just killing their self-esteem, which is the most common one they use because it's less expected. The campus rape, 15% of the college women have been sexually assaulted. Fraternity groups contribute to that percent. Some of the norms don't align with the rape-free campus rules, so they just go ahead and party and everything without setting safety measures for themselves and for the women attending, or just everybody attending the party in general. They usually do the maleness versus femaleness, or masculinity versus femininity. The excessive use of alcohol, which is prones women more to rape, and the peer pressure from all their fellow classmates. And then the consequences of rapes is that it's a continuing process, which means the victim always is suffering, fighting for themselves and fighting for their mental stability after the act has occurred because it just lingers there, it just stays with them. So that's about it.
Hi, I'm Natalie Castro. I'll be doing the second part of the Chapter 5 review from pages 96 to 104. Okay, so I'm going to start at the feeling of being raped again. So this part basically explains that in the 60s and 70s, writers reported many stories about insensitive policemen and how they oftentimes looked at a woman's attractiveness to see if they were really raped or not, and if they were unattractive, they would just dismiss the case. So it explains that this feeling of just, you know, being set aside caused a feeling of a second time raped, but this is more of like a psychological rape between the victim and the police officer, versus the physical trauma of being raped by the actual suspect. So it says that although many police officers have become more respectful towards rape victims, they do still presume that it was their fault for being raped by asking questions like, what were you wearing? Were you drinking with the offender? Were you offered a ride? Did you accept the ride? And just things like that. So it also explains that around this same time, this type of way of presuming or blaming the victim was also used in the courtroom by defense attorneys, because when they were stating their case, they would use the victim's sexual history to determine if she was the one provoking the sexual assault. So, yeah. Also, it explains statutory rape laws and how they do protect the interests of women, but they also, to a larger degree, protect the interests of men too. This is because it forms a cultural definition of women as property, and it gives an example of before marriage, women are seen to belong to their fathers, and after marriage, they are seen to belong to their husbands. So it's not like the rapist is committing a crime towards the woman, it's more so that they're committing a crime towards the husband or the father. However, if a woman back in that time was raped by their husband, the case would be dismissed because since women are seen as property, the husband is allowed to dominate over the wife and therefore do whatever he wants to her. Thankfully, today that's no longer the case because of marital rape laws. But on the other hand, if the wife does actually get raped by someone other than the husband, the myth that the husband is going to be more affectionate and loving and just gentle with her is actually false, because a lot of times husbands see their wives as damaged and dirty and just unwanted. So it gave a statistics that 75 to 85% of marriages where a wife is raped usually end in divorce within 2 years following the assault, which is actually pretty sad. Also, it goes into detail about what types of women usually get assaulted, which also isn't very accurate, but back then it was said that if a woman who had more than 2 sexual partners, or was known as a prostitute, or was a poor woman, and was raped, is less likely to get the rapist convicted for their crime because they are seen as less valuable and cheap women. So a lot of times rapists have said that they don't feel guilty for raping these types of women because they felt like they were seen as a commodity that men were entitled to use whenever they'd want. So also it goes into the impact of pornography and how that can be another factor that views violence towards women, or that shows violence towards women. So a lot of times researchers say that pornography just reinforces that cultural definition of women as property, and also men seeing women as sex objects. So it's also saying that because women, not only women are exposed to this, but also men, porn is more likely to trivialize rape for men, and therefore men are more what's the word? Men are more likely to rape a woman. There it is. So, however, it also states that just because a man does watch porn, it doesn't automatically mean that he's a rapist or is going to rape a woman, but that it does actually impact a man with the characteristics of already being aggressive and angry and violent to be more likely to rape or more dangerous towards women. So also it goes into this idea of the men's masculinity contest, which is just when a big number of men go against each other to kind of show, their peers that they're macho and powerful, by basically sleeping with the largest number of women as possible, and whoever does in turn wins. So this not only objectifies women, but it also allows for this dehumanizing way of thinking about women as sexual objects and just as men's property or just property itself. So it's also described within the language of the culture by using words like screwing, knocking up, scoring, and just this kind of language displays a sense of conquer or power over them. Also, the myth that women ask for it, in a lot of states, it was popular to believe that women had a secret wish of wanting to be raped, but this obviously probably isn't true, only because this myth kind of goes towards the blame the victim approach, whereas she was at the wrong place, wearing the wrong clothes, provoking men to assault her. So this kind of reflects, again, society's sexist approach, that they put women into their place and form a sense of dominion over them. So this also puts rape in a claim that it's all about physical attractiveness, when in case a lot of times it's attractive women but also unattractive women, such as in the example before of prostitutes or poor women. Also, it goes into how women are socialized as little girls to become victims of rape, and this is because when we're small, we are taught to be gentle and sweet and passive, whereas men are taught to be aggressive and violent and tough and active. So therefore, because we were raised to be more ladylike and more respectful, we are less likely to defend ourselves when it comes to sexual harassment, And we're also told that if that does happen, we should stay quiet and ignore it, and therefore it makes us an easier target for rape. It also goes into the global perspective of wartime rape and how in World War II a lot of German soldiers would rape the Jewish and Russian women because they were seen as property that they have conquered. This wasn't only for German soldiers, it was also for Pakistani, Serbian, and Arab soldiers. Whenever they had victories, they would oftentimes rape the women several times while they were there. So because of this, they also leave those women with the sense of being damaged and unwanted to their husbands or future husbands, and therefore are less likely to get married, or it will end in divorce. So that sucks. Oh, it also does a little note that not only women are raped, but also men. In the prison systems, a lot of times men are raped to show dominance over each other, and also just to humiliate their enemies. And it also says that, it also talks about the three theories. I'm only going to touch base on one, but the three theories would be the psychological theory, the sociological theory, and then the feminist theory, and how they view rape as either an attribute or like a psychological problem, or sexual sorry. Sociologists see it as sexual promiscuity, and how feminists see it more as an expression of gender inequality. I'm going to talk about sociological theory, the psychological theory of sexual inadequacy. A lot of sociologists saw rape victims through the behavior of like psychological problems. So it was either a mental characteristic, or it was some sort of like personal defect or emotional disturbance within themselves. Therefore, they found it that there was no specific characteristic that made a man rape, but it was a multitude of characteristics, anywhere from feelings to sexual inadequacies to fear of homosexual tendencies to sexual addiction. So this also caused a controversy because there was no definite characteristics, meaning that not every rapist would have the same characteristics, making it harder to find out what all rapists had in common. So a lot of times they would say it was sexual inadequacy to speak to a woman and flirt with them, but that was easily dismissed because a lot of date rapists could easily flirt with a woman and therefore acted like a non-rapist, making it harder for them to distinguish if they were considered in the characteristic or definition of rapists. So yeah, that's where I stop. Thank you.
Chapter 5 discussed social psychological theory, feminist theory, and gender inequality, inside and outside of the prison, can women rape men, child molestation, boys that are molested, a social profile of child molesters, and the scandal in the Catholic Church. Sociologist Duncan Chappell questions why rape is significantly elevated in other countries. The reasoning suggests that societies with a higher rape rate is more sexually permissive and full of opportunities. Also, the social atmosphere of sexual permissiveness enables a high number of rapes due to it generating a deal of relative frustration caused by men to take a woman saying no personally. Feminist theory and gender inequality. The social psychological theory of sexual permissiveness suggests that gender equality produces more rapes than does sexual inequality. However, the feminist theory blames rape on sexual inequality. Male dominance plays a significant role in rape-prone society. However, masculinity and male dominance are highly valued on college campuses. Rape is very common in the U.S. prison system, and reports show that 1 out of 5 inmates are raped compared to 1 out of 10 females outside of prison. However, the public does not really care about people that get raped in jail because they don't want to have sympathy for people that commit crimes and people that are not abiding by the law. So it's not really any type of sympathy towards people that are in jail versus people that are outside of jail. And statistically proven, 3.8% of men are victims of rape compared to 22% of women. And in prison, male-on-male rape is very, very common. And those men tend to have self-esteem issues because they feel like they're less of a man once another man takes their virginity. Can women rape men? Yes, women can rape men. According to feminists, rape is an expression of power. And there are times where women can overpower a man. Nevertheless, a woman is capable of rape. And when males are raped by women, they feel a loss of masculinity. Child molestation is a form of rape because the children are unaware of what's going on. And girls are more likely to get molested than boys, and majority of child molesters are men rather than women. Most cases of child molestation is with close family members, and people that are molesters usually suffer from personality disorders and lack of human attachments because they don't really feel any type of empathy towards their prey. And victims of child molestation suffer from behavioral problems and poor self-esteem. Molesters are usually over the age of 35, while rapists are under the age of 20. Most molesters are victims of rape compared to rapists. Rapists tend to be tougher, harsher, while molesters are gentle. Studies show that molesters have once been a victim of rape. Molesters also tend to have a little bit more guilt when it comes to their victims, while rapists have no type of compassion or guilt when they do wrong. And not only do women get raped, but young boys are also getting raped across the globe. According to Templar, 83 rapists in California were interviewed, and 59% of them have been molested as children by older women. And back in the early 2000s, reports were revealed that the Roman Catholic priests throughout the United States had sexually molested children. These reports led for other countries to open up about the Catholic Church. Allegations began to surface in Switzerland, Australia, the Netherlands, and Poland. They came to a conclusion that 4 out of 5 Catholic priests are pedophiles, and the absence of women can be an underlying issue of their actions.